Hey there, BookTube. Noah. Everyone who reads and must converse is the channel. Thanks for coming back by. Today I'm back on the David Foster Wallace Oblivion. This short story I'm going over today is one heck of a short story. It's 40 pages. It's story number 5 in the collection Oblivion here, and it is called Good Old Neon. It is a more well-known David Foster Wallace story, I think. It's an amazing story, and trigger warning, it's hardcore. I think that when it comes down to it, I can't spoil this if I tried. This story is vast in its implications for life and for being. And we'll get to it, and I'll try my best to hash out some of these things that David Foster Wallace gets to, but there's no way for me to spoil this for you. There's no way for me to touch on everything that's in these 40 pages. There's no way for me to spoil even what I do touch on, because David Foster Wallace's perception and his laser-like perception of things are on full display here. And by things I mean thoughts, and why we have certain types of thoughts and experiences, and how they shape people internally. And it's just a mind blow of a story. So let's get to it. First, I will say, if there is anything that I'm gonna spoil in this, it is this line right here. Contrary to what you might believe, this is not about me, the narrator. This is not about me. This is a sketch of what I was like before I died, and why I think that I did it. Why what happened afterwards happened, and why it had the impact it did on who this is really about. So that kind of thing is going to be spoiled right there, because the narrator, we have a pretty much nameless narrator. He is called Neil one time in the story, and he is I in this story for most all of the story. Who this is really about, we're going to get to. We meet a character that is just speaking this, and as you can see, he's talking about the moments, or the, a sketch of his life leading up to his death. He's talking about his death by suicide and what happens immediately after death. That is what this is about. And it's hard to take if you're somebody who is very critical of yourself. So there's your warning. Our narrator has a fear of not being enough. That this is what's told to you. These first few points are what's told to you right off the bat. He has a fear of never being enough, a fear of always coming up short or being inadequate, inadequate in other people's eyes, and that kind of thing. He sees himself as a fraud. That is used over and over. He is a fraud. That's how he describes himself. That is his mental fight, that he is a fraud. He is fraudulent in his behavior. He constantly manipulates other people's perceptions. What he perceives other people want, or would make people think a certain kind of way, or be a certain kind of way toward him in their reference to him. Those kind of things he is so invested in, places so much value in, that is what his entire being is wrapped around, is manipulation of other people's perceptions. He sees himself through others' eyes only. He can't really see himself through his own eyes. He actually at some point says that he doesn't think that he has a self of his very own. He's definitely alienated from authenticity. He's a kind of person that his mind, the thoughts and the way that he his frame of reference to life and to being undermines any kind of authentic behavior that he may try to indulge in. And being alienated from authenticity, the other side of that coin is that everything that he does, no matter what he does, he sees it as a performance, and it's performative. So he says multiple times throughout this that he is trying to get help. He is trying to find a way to stop being this fraudulent person and to stop this fraudulent manipulation of everything in his life that he can possibly think of a way to manipulate. But he can't. He can't find a way to stop. And he says multiple times that he's looking for somebody who can see what he's doing. He's looking for somebody that's perceptive enough, and he says, he calls it having the mental firepower enough to call him out on it and to actually go toe-to-toe with him in that kind of arena. In short, this main character has zero concept of happiness. He has lost the ability to see what might make him actually happy. He picks apart other people all the time. So there is a number of scenes that we go through, one of which is the bulk of the story, which is a psychoanalyst scene where he's with a therapist, and they're over the course of months, and we just touch on broadly the first few months, and then how that went, and then what happened through the next 6 months and things like that. But we see in that he's, and also with other people that is referenced, that he picks apart other people, and it's a real reductionist where he's picking apart what they want, what their motivations are, what their desires are, and he begins to actually deeply armchair psychoanalyze his therapist. So this is the kind of person that he is, and you can see that it's completely exhausting, and he is a completely ego-driven. He's very egotistical. Everything, even though he's always looking at himself from the point of view of others, it is completely self-referential. Everybody in his world, he thinks, has is constantly thinking about him and worrying about what kind of person he is or why he does this or that or the other. His ego has completely taken over. And I'll say right here that when it comes down to it, we're talking about somebody very mentally oriented, right? Thoughts run this person's life. His thoughts are the only thing that he identifies with, and thoughts that he identifies with, that is the ego. That is what ego is. Thoughts that you have identified with, and stories in your mind that are made up of thoughts from experiences and how you frame that within yourself and all that. And so the ego is that stuff. That's what the ego is. And the ego, ironically enough, doesn't have any other substance other than that stuff. That's why it's nearly impossible to face the ego, because the only thing you can do is let go, like the onion layers of thoughts and identifications that you've made, deeper and deeper and deeper, until then the ego is actually not strong anymore. It becomes very hazy. It becomes very smoky kind of thing. And then you're like, well, that's me, right? So I'm, the self is not real. But there is a level of being, like the witness and being, that that humanity is and has. And we'll get to that in a little bit. So I'm going to touch on a couple of different scenes other than the analysts that we go through. One is called his holy roller phase. And our narrator joins a Christian church, a very charismatic church. And he says he does this to wake up from this kind of thing that he's doing. Wake up spiritually, even though he doesn't really know what that means. But this is his desire. You know, he does want to get better. Well, he says, right? He says he wants to get better. He's trying different things to get better. So he wants to wake up, and he starts this holy roller phase. And it says for 4 months, he gets there, and it becomes instantly performative. He is taking part in committees, taking part in sitting in the front row, the one that is waving their arms the strongest, and singing praises the loudest, and speaking in tongues, and all this kind of stuff. And he actually fools himself into thinking that he is actually, becoming something more than just this kind of, fraud. But when it comes down to it, the mind can undermine anything. And is he being authentic? Is he not being authentic? What is authenticity? Is he doing something that he wants to do? Is he acting in a way that he really wants to foster and create new habits and to grow and to be a different kind of person? Is that happening, or is it not happening? And that is only a question that inside people can ask and get the answer. And sometimes the first answer is not even the true one. We are complex, very complex beings. But after 4 months, he has this kind of epiphany, this kind of moment of clarity where he sees that, yes, he has been just completely going through the motions to be one of these most active members, and he's been fooling himself this whole time. So he's back into the cycle. And the fraud paradox is what he calls it in the book a little bit, where there's this cycle of fraud happening. There's another kind of Eastern meditation class that he goes to, and it's just meditation. So he's sitting in meditation with a group, and he is the best meditator, even though he describes the personal agony that he goes through by sitting so rigidly and refusing to move and refusing to stop until the teacher rings the bell, even though it's perfectly okay to stop. It's perfectly okay to do it at your pace, this kind of stuff. But this guy is hell-bent on being the best, or what he thinks people think is the best in any situation. So he's putting himself through this, and he is sitting very rigidly, not moving, keeping a docile expression on his face through anything. And he gets the nickname the Statue. In class, he's the best, like that. But see, you also are supposed to do it at home, right? And when he tries to meditate at home, he cannot do it. He can't do what he can do in class because there's nobody there looking at him. That's what he says anyways. Now, that shows him himself very quickly. He's not able to fool himself in that situation that he is actually in it being authentic. He sees that it is a performative thing, and he gets the that nickname, the Statue. And the meditation teacher is like this guru, and so actually gives him a certificate that says best Western meditator, very impressive, the Statue, right? And he sees that this teacher, when he goes to sleep that night, he sees, as he's just kind of drifting off, that this teacher actually saw his inauthenticity, that it was performative. Actually sees that, and that's why there's this nickname given to him, and it called out right in front that this is what he's doing, because it is a performative thing, and he was like that. So then there's this kind of horror that comes up into our narrator, where he can't go back to the next class. And I say, when it comes down to it, that's one of these aspects where, is he being honest when he says that he wants to find someone who can call him out? Because there's somebody who can potentially, and he doesn't pursue that. All right, so the analysis is another is the main part of the story. The analyst is a big guy, a likable guy. Our narrator really likes him. He's a good guy. The first sessions, the narrator is open and candid. He's fencing with the guy, and he's proving through his talk that how smart he is, and that he knows his own problems, that he's very perceptive to his own condition and to how he thinks and how he is. After 5 or 6 months, he admits being a fraud. That is his underlying problem. He says, I'm a fraud. I'm basically dishonest and manipulative in everything that I do, and I can't seem to stop it. I want to stop it, but I can't. And then there is this string of sentences that lead up to the analyst saying what anybody would kind of say in a psychological frame of mind there. He says, well, your honesty about being a fraud, that's you being authentic and honest, right? Because you're telling me the truth that this is your problem, that you're being a fraud. So, therefore, you're not a fraud. At least at that moment, right? You're not a fraud completely. There is this space where you're, at least even to yourself, right? I mean, you're not a fraud, right? And the mind, we see it's amazing in this work. The mind immediately goes to work on this. Even before it's said, the mind is going to work on this idea because it knows it's coming. The ego can see it coming. And when it comes up, it has already been completely invalidated by this kind of thing. The honesty about being a fraud is ultimately manipulative because the narrator knows that the psychiatrist is a smart guy and knows this kind of stuff and would eventually see that he's a fraud, and he's been going there 5 or 6 months, right? That he'll see that he's a fraud and what he does, and so he opens it up and says it in order to kind of keep the fencing and the back and forth going on with the psychiatrist to manipulate the conversation even more. Therefore, he's a fraud. And at that point, we see that self-motivation, his own motivations, he's seeing as manipulation. His own motivation to get better, whatever he does. His own motivations inside to do anything, whether it be the kind of manipulation, fraudulent stuff that he goes through this whole time, or his own actions to get any better, are viewed as manipulation by him. And when he says that, the mind is completely undermining everything. This is a story of somebody locked in the mind and locked in their mental life. He is alienated from his self. He already says, I don't even think I have any self of my own. And what that really means is he's alienated from his own desire. What he wants is even real wants and desires are framed as manipulations. He is alienated from his own feeling anything, and he only follows the only thing that is seen as anything valid is what he perceives other people's desires to be. That's where he's at. The psychiatrist he sees is getting more out of it than he is, and then he starts completely giving up on the psychoanalyzation and basically psychoanalyzing the therapist and creating this whole ridiculous, overblown story about him. Really, it's crazy amazing. But we do have this episode which is called "I Didn't, I Couldn't," and this kind of thing is a kind of a seed. Now he says, well, I was always a fraud. I was a fraud before this. This is just what showed me that I was a fraud, right? But he's 4 years old in this. Okay? So how much, how much to look at this as it is not formative to your being is a fallacy. But he's looking at it like that. I mean, he just completely invalidates everything that could possibly help him. He's 4 years old. He breaks a bowl, and he notices that if he confesses to breaking the bowl, he did break the bowl. If he confesses in a clumsy and implausible way, that his parents think that he's trying to take the blame for his sister breaking the bowl. And so he sees right then, at a very, just through happenstance almost, that he can manipulate his parents in that by the way that he's delivering that he's not lying. He's admitting to breaking the bowl, but doing it in such a way that they look at him like he is being noble and he is self-sacrificing to take the blame for this from his sister, so his sister doesn't get in trouble. Well, they blame the sister, his sister, for doing it. She denies it. She didn't do it. You know what I mean? But even her denials then are fall on deaf ears. They punish her for breaking the bowl, and they punish her more for lying when he broke the bowl and he's lying about it. But to the 4-year-old now, this is powerful, right? He feels powerful. He sees that he there's some power in that. He's doing something, and it makes him feel smart. A 4-year-old, right? I mean, it's just a very perceptive scene. And so we touch on a little bit of why. The impetus, the seed that's there within our narrator from that is deeper than thought. It's deeper than thoughts. The 4-year-old didn't think about all these kind of things the way that we're talking about it and the way that they're delivered in the story. And the narrator calls that out, especially because there's a lot about thoughts and language, how we express things in this story. And this thing is deeper than thoughts. It is the feeling of power and smart and desirable things that comes from this that give it some value and is part of what makes him view the world the way that he does. And this is seen as like a truth of life, that doing that is like a truth that you can do that, and that this is what people do, what people are doing. And it's really wild. He has this kind of thing where outwardly he is perfect, and inwardly he sees, at least subconsciously, that if people know what he's like inwardly, then he is a complete disappointment to humanity, to everybody. There's framed this fear and love, that there's only two frame of references for our world, how a human being frames the world and how they kind of are in the world. Either they're operating from out of a fear, or they're operating out of love. And these terms are used very, very broadly in this definition, but it is true. And you can't, and they are mutually exclusive. You can't be operating in a place of judgment, fear, manipulation, scheming, conniving, and you can't do that and also be loving people at the same time. It is impossible, and there's all kinds of mental gymnastics you can do to that individuals can do to think that they are doing that. But our narrator comes up with that, and then is given that by the therapist, and there's actually a glimmer of hope in our narrator at that point, that not being able to love, if that's really his problem, that he sees, maybe I'm not able to love, and if not being able to love is what the problem is, in a way that he might frame his problem, then at least it's a different pathway to work within into himself, and it might bear some fruit. It might be something that would lead to a breakthrough, right? And so there is this kind of hopeful spot there, and then he is watching TV at home, and Cheers comes on, and there's a joke in Cheers which completely destroys him. Frasier and Lilith are two therapists that are on Cheers. I'm sure a lot of people are aware. The Lilith comes on screen and says, Frasier says, "How was your day, honey?" Things like that. And she goes, "Oh, if I have to listen to one more yuppie complain that they don't know how to love, then I'm going to be sick." Audience laughs, right? So, with this, the narrator is seeing that cliche and melodrama as ways of, speaking, talking about feelings that are inside. Cliches and melodrama are inauthentic. That this is just another way that he has completely fooled himself, and that he is not an authentic person, and it's just really, really messed up. There's a lot about time dilation in this, because thoughts are so fast, and we have so much thoughts and so many things that can insights and be inspired, and associations be made, and all this kind of stuff happens in a flash. So there's quite a bit of talk of that and about time, and then we talk about thoughts a bit, and I want to then go to and just ask a few questions. One is, if someone is your equal, like if someone was this narrator's equal, and they see the fraud, they actually don't have any obligation to let him know, right? The assumption is that somebody's going to see that he's a fraud like this and look at it like a challenge, and think that it's something that they should, enter into and try to save him from it or something. Well, so many people could have seen this guy as a fraud, for sure, and just walked away and said, who cares about that person? You know what I mean? Nobody has an obligation to tell you what they're thinking and feeling and how they frame you as a person. So there's fallacies all through this kind of thing. Another is that the meditation teacher sees his fraud, and the narrator rejects it. He says he's trying to be genuine, but no. As with the psychiatrist too, what he does is he quietly judges everybody and uses his own mental perceptions of what he thinks that they want, what their desires are, and things like that. Concerning him only, that is the truth. And that's just all he's using for his outlook on people and his way of looking at the world. He never is really opening up to somebody and continuing on. When the therapist goes down this track that he sees as he can manipulate it, why didn't he stay in an honest, open dialogue? Well, I'm thinking this right now, Doc. This is what I'm thinking. This is how I'm seeing to manipulate this situation. Even the conversations that we're having, and get to the details. Get down into it. He gives up. He does that, and it's just ridiculous. But at the end, and I'm going to go ahead to the end, so click off if you haven't read it and you want to before this. What do you think you are? Are you thoughts? Are you thoughts that you identify with? That your ego? Are you your past? The narrator's asking this question. He says the truth is dying isn't bad, but it takes forever. Because that moment is the fastest moving, the most drawn out, the eternal present is what he kind of frames it as. You have heard this before, that this is what dying is like, and you know what it is. Everybody knows what it is. They're alienated from it. You've actually felt it, something like it. You've actually felt this kind of thing in your life. Of course, we see others perceiving us, and you think it makes you a fraud. And so in that part, at the end here, the narrator, or the perspective changes of this book. We're no longer in a first-person perspective giving the story. It becomes a narrator talking about the I and the you. And the I, the thoughts of the I, the thoughts of everything that's going on in this book is David Foster Wallace. For sure. And the narrator, what has been framed as the narrator before, is a person that David Foster Wallace looks up in his yearbook, high school yearbook, that he went to school with after seeing in the newspaper that he had killed himself in a car accident and the circumstances of that. So David Foster Wallace is exploring what it is that might draw the narrator, that acquaintance, old school friend maybe, who knows, what would draw somebody to commit suicide. And the kinds of things that we get into with that is all David Foster Wallace's stuff. That is David Foster Wallace that is doing that. And at the end is very, very perceptive statement that David Foster Wallace is a very much stronger person than the kind of thing that we've gone through with this, with the inauthenticity, looking at himself like a fraud and all this kind of stuff. And what it comes down to is commanding that inner critical voice to be silent. We can't stop our thoughts. We can't stop our minds. We're never going to stop it. But what we can do is we can command for it to be silent, or at least deny it, say no to those kind of judgments and things that threaten to overwhelm us and to limit us in our perspective, and actually come from a more heart place where self and other are not these two sides that are infinitely separate. Self and other are together and the same in big ways. And a lot of the self and others that are in this world are very much the same, if not 90% the same. The only things that are different is the outer kind of stuff. The inner, from the heart, we're all the same. In our minds, we're all very different. So those kind of things is just what's explored, and it can be explored to exhaustion. This book, or this short story, 40 pages, is one of the most powerful 40 pages and most vast in its implications for life and being that I've ever read. I love good old Neon. I hope you do too. Let me know let me know in the comments. All good. Thank you very much, BookTube. Bye bye now.